and he's going to give a talk tonight. I want to put something of that Bhakti Yoga. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. It's been, I think, 20 years since I've been to Sedona. Almost 1994, I think, was here last. So it's a pleasure to be here. So tonight I want to talk about a very important principle called karma. Everybody's heard the word, right? It's part of the English dictionary now. But oftentimes people are a little confused about what that means. So we'd like to explain it a little more clearly. In the Bhagavad-gita, Lord Krishna, he explains 5 subject matters. One is God. The second is the living being, us. The third is material nature. The fourth is time, and the fifth one is karma. So all these things are explained in the Bhagavad-gita in such a way that after reading the Bhagavad-gita, we can understand what it is this world is, how we're here, how this world works, how we're stuck here, or how we can get out of this place if we want, and where to go. Because you can't go somewhere where you don't know, right? So, who's heard of, now karma is explained in many different books. Each generation seems to have its own different version. Going back some years, there's a book written by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. Anybody read that one? Yeah? Okay. Then later, The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. Yes? Anyone? Okay. And then later, in the 80s, Tony Robbins, Unlimited Power. Right? And then, I don't know, it was in the 90s. Maybe there was one. But now, the most recent incarnation of this genre is The Secret. Anybody read that book or see the movie? Yeah, good. So these books, they all actually explain the process of karma. But they leave out some really important things. And I'd like to mention what those important things are, so that, of course, when I'm saying these books, you're all nodding your heads, so you know these things. It is important for you to understand, then, what are the important things that they're not telling. Now, in The Secret, she brings in, Rhonda Burns, she brings in many people to talk about how you can have anything that you want, right? Anything, whatever you want, right? And how? All you have to do is desire it. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Sounds simple. Actually, it is quite simple, because the fact is, all we do have to do is desire. And then that sets into motion the chain of karma. The beginning of karma is desire. The rest of it is carried out, it's explained in the Bhagavad-gita, that after we desire, the rest of fulfilling that desire, that's carried out by what Krishna calls the material nature, or the modes of material nature. In other words, this universe has a very automatic process of fulfilling our desire. I'm not going to go into the details of that tonight, because it would make the whole thing too long. But suffice it to say, I'll tell you what, let me just give you a simple example. I started reading these books back in, I think the first one I read was Napoleon Hill's book in 1979, Think and Grow Rich. And so I had a sales job at that time, and I used to apply this to selling. I was selling securities, investments, stocks and bonds, and I used to want to make trades. We call it trade. When somebody buys an investment, we call it a trade. So I wanted to do trades of $100,000 or more, because just one of those things could make half of my paycheck, right? So I used to meditate on making $100,000 trades. And I made more $100,000 trades than anybody else in my office. And every month I would have at least one of those. Another time I was, earlier, I was in one of our temples in Miami. And in that temple were the offices for our Bhagavad-gita book trust, the publishing arm of the Hare Krishna movement. And I was just looking into one of those windows of those offices, and I was thinking, boy, wouldn't it be nice to work for the BDT? Because it was always, it seemed like it'd be a nice thing to do. It really wasn't a serious thought. I wasn't going to go apply for a job or anything. It was just, how we say, a passing thought. Well, it wasn't maybe 4 or 5 months later they came and asked me to be the manager of the BBT. And I wound up working in that office that I was looking into. So a simple thought, a simple desire like that creates this chain of karma that brings the result to us. So I'm sure you all probably have your own little stories that you might be able to tell about that. Things that seem to come miraculously or by chance or something like that. Or sometimes we may apply them intentionally. For example, also when I lived in San Francisco, it's a really difficult place to find a parking spot, There's more cars than there are spots on the street. And you can drive around looking for a half an hour or more trying to find a place for your car. So I learned after a few of those episodes that if I visualized, using Shakti Gawaine's principles, visualized my parking place, when I started out to go to the city, that there would be one waiting for me when I got there. So this is a little desire, a little karmic reaction, right? Not a big one. Not like desiring to have $1 million or a big mansion or something like that. But a parking spot, okay, that can come. But what if you have a big desire? Like they say on The Secret, whatever you want. You want an income of $1 million? Like the fellow, right? Chicken Soup for the Soul. That fellow, he had a nice story. He wanted to have $100,000 in 1 year, so he started applying that idea, thinking about that. And he got the first year $92,000, and then he went on from there. But some of us, even if we have such a desire, somehow or other, it doesn't seem to manifest. Now, why is that? That's an important thing to know. And that's what they don't tell in those books or in that video. The thing is, karma is kind of like a bank balance. If you want to go shopping, you have to have some money in the bank, right? Or in your checkbook. You go shopping, if you have enough money, you can buy what you want. If you don't have enough money, you don't get it. Simple as that. Well, karma is somewhat the same thing. If we have a sufficient balance of karma, we want that $1 million income or $100,000 income. If we have that sufficient karma, then we can get that result. If we don't have sufficient karma for it, we're not going to get it no matter how much we desire it. We're not going to get it in this lifetime. This is what they don't tell you. If you're not going to get it in this lifetime, if you don't have the karmic bank balance for it, you're going to have to come back again. Do you want it that bad? That you're going to have to come back and get it in the next life? And who knows how that might be. For example, my sister has a nice house. She has 2 cats that live there. The cats live there more than she and her husband do. They're trapped there, actually. And I sometimes think about these cats. In a previous life, they had a desire to live in a very nice house, very comfortably, without having to work. All the food that they want to eat. And just nothing to do, lay around and sleep. that might be the desire they had, and how is it being fulfilled? So those kind of things can happen. Yeah, it certainly can. So we have to know that we have to have sufficient balance, bank balance in our karma for that to happen. And if we don't, then it's not going to work. I give another little anecdote from my life, which is interesting. As Prabhu was saying, I travel and preach in Eastern Europe and Russia. And several years ago, I was living in the western side of Russia, quite near the border of Ukraine, in a village. And I was attempting to buy a village house there and get a really good deal on the house there. This house was about $3,000. And it was okay. It didn't have indoor plumbing, and it didn't. It had a wood stove that you would use, but it was livable. And so I asked them, check with the authorities and see if I can buy this house. So they checked around all the authorities and everybody they could find and said, no problem, an American can buy the house there. So I went ahead with the transaction, bought the house. And then after I gave the money for it, when they were trying to finalize the paperwork, the government came back and said, no, an American can't own a house close to the border of Russia. Later on, a few months later, I happened to meet one of the Vedic astrologers, and I asked him about that, and he looked at my chart and he said, yes, in this lifetime you will not be able to own real estate. And if you can own real estate, you won't be able to live there. So this is my karma, right? I can't own real estate. So we see, I bought the house, but I didn't. It wasn't my house. And I had to actually put it in the name of one friend there. So karma works like that we can get some things. It works by desire. And if we don't get it in this lifetime, it forces us. We're forced to come back in another life to get it. Now, this is a very important principle to understand in the way this universe is set up. Because unconscious of this principle, which most people are, it acts nonetheless. We go through our life and we have many, many desires, many thoughts, passing thoughts like that job thing. We don't even think about it, right? But all of those desires are not going to be fulfilled in this lifetime. Therefore, they become the cause of our being born here again. And again, and again, and again, and again. And it goes on and on and on like that. We're each carrying with us a huge amount of, let's say these we compare them to seeds, desire seeds. Just like spring is coming. I don't know here what your climate is. Maybe, I think you probably plant in the spring some things. So in spring people plant seeds, and in due course of time they sprout and then they bear fruit. Not all the seeds that are in the ground will sprout at the same time. Just like if you dig up, say you go, I don't know about here, because this is kind of a desert, but in the other places where I live, if you go and you pull up all the things that are growing, right, so that say you're going to prepare a garden, and you wait a little while, things will start popping up again. Well, there's seeds in the ground that are just waiting for the right opportunity to fructify. So these karma seeds are like that. They're lying in, let's say, we could say wait. They're simply waiting for the right circumstances to arise. And then when that happens, then we get the fruit of that desire, or the reaction of the desire. And this is called the fulfillment of that karma. So, the important thing to know is these desires, this chain of karma that we've set into motion, it keeps us coming back again and again and again, unlimitedly. So much so that all of us in this world are considered to be eternally conditioned souls. That is, it's impossible practically to trace out when we originally got here. We've been here a long, long time. Now the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna explains how to change karma. Okay? Of these 5 things we mentioned in the Gita, right? God, the living being, the material energy, time, and karma, all of them are eternal except for karma. And karma can be changed. It's important to know how to change karma. 2 things. One can change their karma by canceling the desire, giving up the desire. Or one can change the karma by coming to the transcendental platform. And this is what Krishna explains in Bhagavad-gita. In chapter 2 of Bhagavad-gita, text number 39, Krishna states, Eshite Vita Sanke Buddhir Yoge Vimam Shinu Udya Yukto Yaya Karma Karma something like that. Karma Bandham Prahasyasi. Karma. So Krishna's, the translation is, I've explained to you the analytical knowledge of Sankhya philosophy. Now listen to the principles of yoga, whereby one learns to work without fruitive result. So fruitive result, or karma, this is the same idea. Fulfilling the desire is called the fruits of the desire. So fruitive result, where everybody's acting for a purpose. In every action that we do, there's a particular purpose that we want. Otherwise, we wouldn't be performing the action. This is called fruitive activity. And Krishna is going to explain in the Bhagavad-gita how to become free from karma, how to become free from this fruitive desire. And this is called the spiritual science of the Vedas. Spiritual science. Now, first thing we have to ask about this is, where do these material desires come from? Well, do they just happen by chance? Krishna explains that while contemplating the objects of the senses, we see something, oh, that's nice, I'd like to have that. The examples I gave you from my own life. So while contemplating the objects of the senses, one develops an attachment for them. And from that comes the desire. We see something and then we think, oh, that's nice, I want one of those. I want to have one of those for myself. So this is one of the sources of desire. Contemplating the objects of the senses, seeing things, coming in contact with things, or hearing about something. We hear about perhaps, you're probably, any of you are natives here to Sedona? No. So, we hear about this place, Sedona, and we think, oh, that's a nice place. Maybe I can live there. We maybe came for a visit, and then you come check it out, and then you decide, oh, I want to live there. So by hearing about things, we also develop a desire to want to acquire them. So whatever way it is, by some stimulation of the senses, we develop an attachment, an attraction for something, and then we desire to acquire that. So this is the process that works, that sets into motion the chain of karma. This happens because of one particular reason, and that is we are not spiritually fulfilled. We're spiritual beings living in a material body. And as spiritual beings, we have desires. That's the nature of the spiritual being, to have desires. We want, what are those desires? Generally, we all want love. We all want recognition. We all want to have relationship. We want a sense of fulfillment, amongst other things. These are actually spiritual qualities. The problem, however, is that we're trying to fulfill these needs, these desires, in a material world. And we're trying to fulfill these spiritual desires with material objects. The consequence of that is that we cannot find the fulfillment and the satisfaction that we actually seek. So regardless of what it might be, ultimately, in the final essence, it's not fulfilling. As promising as it might be in the beginning, we see that in the end, well, it's not exactly what I thought it might be. I was hoping it might be a little better or different. Now, in the Vedic literature, it explains, however, how to find that sense of fulfillment. Where we actually, is it possible to be satisfied? Is it simply just some kind of utopian dream that we desire something that's impossible to achieve? No. We actually have those desires because they're in the innate nature of our spiritual being. That's where they come from. But instead of trying to fulfill them in this material world, those desires can actually be only fulfilled in connection with God in the spiritual world. So this is the secret to ending the chain of karma. To connect all of our desires with God, and what we find when we do that is that we achieve a sense of satisfaction. We become so satisfied, in fact, that the things of this world, they appear to be insignificant. I just heard an anecdote about this the other day. There was Alexander the Great, when he was going around conquering everything, and he had gotten into India somewhat, and so there was one sage kind of sitting there, and Alexander the Great, he was feeling magnanimous. He was a great man in many respects. So he told his men, he says, tell that man, he appeared to be neglected. You know, the holy men in India, sometimes you see them, what do they have? A loincloth and a water pot. That's it. So when we see that, we think, well, let me help this poor fellow. He's obviously in need, right? So Alexander the Great came over to him and he said, my dear sir, I'm Alexander the Great, and I've got a vast territory. I'd like to help you. Is there anything that I can do for you? And the man said to him, can you step aside a little bit? You're blocking the sun. So in other words, Alexander the Great, he's got a lot of stuff, right? He can fulfill so many desires if you have material desires. But this particular sage, he was so satisfied, he didn't want anything. He was satisfied simply to be there and undoubtedly engaging in his meditation and his spiritual practice, which was bringing him that fulfillment. So this is the practice and the idea behind Krishna consciousness, what we call Krishna consciousness, our spiritual practice, that by that process we can actually achieve that satisfaction and fulfillment that we all desire. This then is what allows us to break the chain of karma, because your desires are all fulfilled. I don't want anything else. There's nothing else that I need besides what? I want to enter into that spiritual world. I want to have that connection with God. And that desire is what will take us out of this world. The same thing that keeps us bound to this world, desire, is the same thing that becomes the source of our liberation from this world. So we simply have to know how to apply it. If we apply it to the things of this world, we're trapped here. But if we apply it to the spiritual world, it becomes the source of our liberation. I'll stop there. Maybe you have some questions or comments.
it's not really semantic yet, the difference between satisfaction and contentment. In that case, I would say, I would say that he was contented with things as they were, rather than having his needs filled. Of course, you can give up the need and play with that some, but it just feels like I found a lot better longevity to contentment and satisfaction.
That's good. It's a nice concept to bring up. Contentment. Many people, they can find contentment by, so let's say, especially in the modern culture, living within our means. If we if we have desires that are beyond our means, then our mind is always disturbed. But if we allow ourselves to simply be content with what comes in a natural way, then we let's say, if we, how to put it better, we can allow ourselves to live within our means, and this way find contentment. I'm speaking of something different though. Satisfaction, I'm speaking of satisfaction being different from contentment, in that the spiritual science is such that as one makes progress on this spiritual path, one actually loses their attraction for the things of this world. That it's not a matter of being content, it's a matter of not having any interest in it. So for example, you may find a contented man, and we see sometimes, people, for example, they come into wealth, or circumstances change and so on, and it changes their circumstances. Something happens, or a person may be contented, then they get married, and the circumstances change. So things are always changing in this world. So the point is that kind of contentment generally, let's say, may not be, give the benefit of the doubt, may not be a permanent situation. And in fact, cannot be actually, if we get to the bottom of it, because ultimately, we're all going to have to die. Then, what happens at the time of death? We may be content with our circumstances in this life, but ultimately in that final issue, when we're faced with death, then this creates another very great challenge. How do we deal with that? In any case, I'm trying to make a distinction here between contentment and complete satisfaction. The Bhagavad-gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, explains that the things of this world, they become insignificant and uninteresting for those persons who have actually achieved a level of spiritual progress. Which is why we see that the yogis, the saints, they are not interested in the things of this world, regardless of what might be offered to them. Anyway, is that okay? I'm trying to make the distinction, but I'm not sure if I'm making.
Well, satisfaction is normally used to talk in speaking of having a need or a desire and having it fulfilled.
Okay.
And as you said, things can often change. Yeah. Contentment is where there is no, you've gone beyond the need or desire, it having an attraction to you. Otherwise you couldn't be content, like living within your means. Well, you don't have desire to make more, have more, different, bigger, or have power over others, so you can be content. And living within your means as a spiritual being is realizing the difference of where your desire, or where your interest lies, and where you can be, have it fulfilled. And satisfied, like you eat till you're satisfied. You pray till you're satisfied, or etc. Well, when you're content, it's just in normal usage, it just says, I am with, among, or in the process of being in this tent, within the circumstances where I'm at, as you said, within your means. As a spirit, when we see that there is no, that the world is in us, we're not in the world, then your contentment, is constantly expanding to greater spheres of awareness, and there's no need for that to happen when we are who we really are. That is our condition. Our nature as being of light is to be in favor of giving, of expressing, of letting things pass through and continue on. When we get to that point, we have no need to give someone or to release something that they did. We realize that no one has done anything. When we are who we really are as a being, then our nature is to be in favor of and produce, have that giving nature. And that's what we're talking about in all these things. Instead of being in favor of getting something, instead of forgetting, we're forgiving.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
That whole question, because I always felt that too, there was just something missing to those other teachings, the secret, and this and that, and it's like, you see some people that really desire something, and they don't get it this lifetime.
And in that book he was saying, we can be happy when we stop trying to be happy. And of course that was a great puzzle to me to read at that time. And but later I've actually understood that this is actually correct, and this is what you're speaking about, I believe.
Part of the fun there is when you say be here now, when you can truly be here now, you know you came here after. I just affirming that was good.
Yeah. It's true. And actually that's part of karma. Huh? The things, our experience in this life, they are to a large degree determined by what we have done in our previous life. I could make those $100,000 trades because I was endeavoring for that, but it was allowed by my previous life. If I didn't have that karma for it, I wouldn't have been able to actually get that, no matter how much I desired it. And conversely, what we do in this life is determining the characteristic or the nature of our next life. Again, either in the material world or in the spiritual world, if we can break the chain of karma. The nice thing to know, important point, important detail. Once we go to that spiritual world, there is no more karma of coming back here. It's an eternal place. Once going there, we never have to change bodies, because everything there is permanent and eternal. This world is characterized by change. Everything is always changing. But there, we find that complete love, satisfaction, fulfillment, everything that we've ever wanted is there. And that is our birthright. We will, sooner or later, achieve that. And we can look forward to that. Yeah.
I have a little comment about the secret and just people talking about the law of attraction in general. It's like, it's almost like I hear a lot of messages like that if something happens to you that you must have done something to bring that to you, and it's like there's always this element of guilt, or like it's your fault, like that. If you get into a car accident, like it's your fault because you were doing something to attract that car accident to you. And I'm having a hard time kind of dealing with that, because it's like I understand that things, that we attract things to us that everyone puts off a frequency, blah blah blah. But it's like at what point are we responsible for what happens to us, and then what other people do to us? Like if someone does something bad to us, I'm not responsible for that person's actions, who just T-boned me. I didn't make them T-bone me. So how?
This is a good question.
So
in Bhagavad-gita, Lord Krishna is God, and even he says there that karma the actions and reactions of karma are very difficult to understand. And like you say, what's the cause and what's the effect? Is that person attacking me an effect of my previous karma, or is it the cause that he's doing? He's beginning the chain of karma,
Yeah.
right? And it could be either one. Now, there's an interesting anecdote regarding this in the Srimad Bhagavatam, this book right here, if you can see it on top. There's the personality of religion in the form of a bull. His name is Dharma. And at the beginning of this age, he was being attacked by the personality of Kali. So the king at that time, Parikshit, he came by, he happened upon the scene, and he asked, what's going on here? He's the lawman, right? It's his job to set things straight. So he's asking, what's going on? Who's doing what? Although it was very obvious that Kali was harming this bull, still Parikshit inquired. He inquired from Dharma, the bull, but Dharma would not identify Kali as the agent of his suffering. And in fact, he said that if I was actually innocent, this would not be happening to me. Now, whether that's the case or not, if we take that position, we can always break the chain of karma, because there can be this action and reaction can go back and forth again and again. For example, you attack me, next life I attack you. Next life you attack me, next life I attack you. Where is it going to stop? And in fact, our spiritual master Prabhupada, it's the comment that, well, you know, we have these hotspots in the world, like Palestine and Israel, or, you know, Pakistan and India, or, you know, so many other places, where there's always these border wars going on. And Prabhupada commented that in one lifetime, for example, they're Israeli, the next lifetime they become Palestinian, next lifetime they become Israeli, next lifetime they become Palestinian. So where does it stop? It's going to stop when somebody chooses not to identify the perpetrator as the cause of his suffering, just to let it go. And that breaks the chain of karma. Yeah.
Karma is many times represented as being negative. And karma, that's one of the things that I like to see, is that, for example, Christ on the cross. People look at it and say, what did you do that you ended up being on the cross? You know, in their minds. And they see that as a punishment or as a detrimental instead of a transformational event of cataclysmic proportion throughout the universe. I mean, you know, to where, and Buddha had the same thing going on all the time, seeing what the reason they were content was they could see the expanded or eternal view instead of focusing on the appearance. They were able to hold to the perfection.
Very good. Very nice way to